Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Voss, editor-in-chief of Disobedient Media, here with Suzie Dawson, who is a journalist, activist, and current leader of the Internet Party of New Zealand, and we are once again here with Decipher You. Really excited to get into some Snowden files this evening and see what we can find. And I'm really glad that you all are here and have joined us, and I'm just checking in with chat, and thank you everyone for commenting. I see Barbara and Matt and Eric and Fly are here, and Crockatoo. Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey everyone, we've made it. Sorry, I'm a little bit late today, unsurprisingly. Sorry, I just fixed my headset. Like I said on Twitter a few minutes ago, unfortunately, all of my production crew quit before this episode. Okay, I'm just lying. There's actually no production crew, which is why I'm constantly late trying to juggle everything and get everything together. But we're here and we've made it. And thank you all for waiting. Thank you so much for waiting.
Agreed.
Okay.
And no, see, I think that they did exist. It's just that they wouldn't take cryptocurrency. And so we had to fire them, you know, it was just the last thing. So
maybe somewhere in some distant future, we'll have a major television network that actually covers real news like this, who will give us a production crew. But currently, to my knowledge, they don't exist. So it's literally just us and our webcams.
Indeed.
Okay, I'm just going to open up the docs and we can get started. RSFO always gets left out on the shout out. Hi RSFO, and there's some new people as well. Hi In It For Fun and Cryptox. Super cool. Dare I ask, is that what we're up to? No, we've been past this. What the president wants to know on Inauguration Day. The Denver, NSA in Turkey. That was interesting, that Turkey document last week. Paradise Found. There's an interesting document about Hawaii.
I'm just scrolling up to the chat. Did anybody post the Etherpad for this evening? Or did I just miss it? I probably missed it.
Crockatoo's probably posted it.
Yeah, he probably has. I'm just scrolling up to find it.
It looks like we have another Iraq is so wonderful document.
Oh, are you looking through them right now? Oh yeah, I see Crockatoo posted the Etherpad. Thank you so much, Crockatoo. I appreciate it very, very much. I'm going to throw it into chat as well. Oh no, Matt got it. Thank you, Matt, as well.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's to you guys as well. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share screen.
Awesome.
Okay, do you want to read this one?
Sure.
It's about Hawaii.
I'm just messing with my screen settings to show that, because I had your picture covering the text. Now I'm good, and I'll go.
You love me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's titled Paradise Found, and the subtitle is Wintertime in Oahu, home to the Kunia Regional Security Operations Center. And it talks about it being cold and a winter day in the islands, and they had to put heat on in the car because the temperature was only 68 degrees. Okay, so they're talking about mundane stuff, you know, describing the scenery and whatnot for the first paragraph. And then the second paragraph gets more interesting. It says, though most KRSO steers live near the facility, I live on the windward side of the island. It's a long drive by Hawaii standards, about 30 miles, but every day when I come home, I get a spectacular view of the crystal blue water when I cross the Kulau Mountains. Our house sits at the base of the mountains, and when it rains, there are 16 waterfalls, blah, 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 wonderful life, etc. And they say it sounds too good to be true, but there's a catch. When it gets down to 70, he has to wear pants, blah, blah, blah. More advertisement. This reads like one of the advertisements we read before, like the Travel's Guide to Pine Gap or whatever, from the Australian version. Out there, I'm on a 25% COLA, blah, blah, blah. They're talking about pay scale. And then they talk about island fever. I really do not see anything interesting in here yet. The Big Island's 2 peaks, see snow every winter, blah, blah, blah. And NSAers have an annual Thanksgiving on the beach. Yeah, that's literally it. It's just an advertisement for being part of the NSA on Hawaii. Unless Suzie sees something interesting there that I missed.
I think I'll go wander down to Waikiki, have a Mai Tai on the beach and wait for, oh my God, it's like so James Bond, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it was so gross. I just couldn't read it. It was just too much.
Lonely Planet Hawaii.
Exactly. There you go.
Okay. Next document. Right. Too much redundancy is redundant. So this is probably just like one of these like grammar lessons that they give basically.
Yeah, no, scanning through, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, I'm going to skip that.
Awesome.
Countering IEDs in Iraq.
This, I think I've seen a similar document with you. I remember the discussion of the on-off sequences, maybe. Maybe just been similar.
Yeah, I don't see anything in there either.
Oh, here we go. With
International Affairs Institute, right? IAI.
Yeah, that's familiar.
Okay, do you want to read through this one?
Sure, definitely. This looks more interesting. So the International Affairs Institute, IAI, presents Old Europe plus New Europe minus Russia, Clash of Civilizations by Ambassador James Rosapepe on 2nd of February 2005. Blah, blah, blah. Ambassador Rosapepe served as ambassador to Romania from 1998, and I'm probably butchering his name, to 2001 in the Clinton administration. That's interesting. He writes and speaks regularly on European and Atlantic economic and security issues. His articles have appeared most recently on the Wall Street Journal, Europe, the Baltimore Sun, and the Washington Times. He is a former member of the Maryland House of Delegates and is currently working on a book titled The New Europe. Please note the speaker is not cleared. The presentation and question and answer session will be unclassified. Please join us for a thought-provoking presentation and discussion of post-Cold War Europe. And it will not be videotaped. Interesting. I mean, in and of itself, it's not too huge of an amazing, like they're not telling us a whole lot about it, but it's interesting that he worked for the Clinton administration, and it's interesting that we're seeing the IAI again. It just emphasizes.
Yeah, so IAI lecturing at NSA.
Again, yeah, that just really strengthens what we discussed about that same institution before. Definitely.
The other thing that's interesting, of course, is the title of his talk. So it pretty much confirms that there is this agenda to alienate Russia from Europe.
Yeah, true.
So when they talk about old Europe, I assume that they're meaning like all of the old Soviet states. And those Soviet states are being stripped or have been systematically stripped away from Russia and integrated into Western Europe. So like the borders of Western Europe just get wider and wider and wider.
That makes sense.
Okay, here's some feedback on that article about editing text. A car bomb is a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. Okay, guys, I'm just skipping through anything that isn't really relevant to our research. Okay, this looks very, very interesting. Let's go through this.
Okay,
So it relates to assets. Yeah, sure.
Okay. It's unclassified. It's titled Managing SID Property. And it says, did you know SID has almost 39,000 pieces of accountable property valued at more than $639 million in its inventory? Did you know that the Department of Defense and NSA regulations require SID that representatives not only know where each of the 39,000 items is at all times and under whose control, but also to inventory each piece of every year, and laptops and personal digital assistants, PDAs, twice a year. As you can imagine, this is a daunting task. Their hard work and communication with 120 plus SID property officers, a dedicated SID staff has done an outstanding job managing SID property. This past year in 2004 was the best yet. 99.66% of all SID property was successfully accounted for. Although unquestionably a good year, we could believe that we can do better by improving upon past successes and avoiding various pitfalls. By avoiding a few common problems, we could reach our goal of 100% accountability, and here's how. Number one, all portable computing devices, which include laptop and PDAs, must be secured at all times. Number two, equipment transfers to other agency organizations must be documented on a transfer sheet. Number three, equipment shipments, including hand-carried shipments, must be documented on the DD1149 web shipping system. Number four, equipment should not be loaned to other locations. If transferred, it should be documented on a shipping document. Note, it can always be transferred back, but if the item becomes missing, it is then the responsibility of the site. If the equipment cannot be transferred and must be noted as a loan, then it is the organization's responsibility to keep track of the equipment while at site, and periodic verification throughout the year of the equipment's current location should be made. And then number five, every employee is responsible for property accountability. Please take a few minutes to determine who the property officer is for your organization. Number six, if equipment is installed, moved, or deinstalled by a local systems administrator, notify your property officer with the details so that he or she is aware and can follow up as necessary. Number seven, if equipment is transferred to Eagle Alliance or EA with an EA barcode affixed, forward a copy of the asset information management form or email to your PO. Number eight, in order to maintain the integrity of the property database, it is imperative that all property officers receive the proper training. It is the manager's responsibility to ensure the property officer receives the training within 3 months of being appointed. Training dates are available on the SID webpage. In short, property accountability is everyone's responsibility. By following these guidelines, SID may be able to achieve its goal of 100% accountability for all property. And that looks like the end of the document. Was there anything interesting there that caught your attention?
Yeah, in itself it's not particularly interesting, except I wonder what 0.034% of 639 million is, because it sounds like a few $1 million worth of equipment is going missing every year. Yeah, although as a percentage it sounds quite good, but like as an actual monetary value is probably significant.
Yeah, I think that might be worth a line, just like in whenever you plot out the dot points that you post on the Decipher website, like one line mentioning that. It might be worth that. Yeah, no, if it really, I think we need more information about what it is that's going missing. Like if it's laptops going missing, that would be extremely significant. If it's pens and papers and books going missing, maybe not. Yeah, and I think as well, I think it's important that they gave us a total number to work with, even though they don't, like you said, they're not telling us what they're defining that as. But I think that the overall number is still something that I would want to keep track of. Maybe some other documents will add some information to that.
Okay, here we go.
So it's titled, Generally Speaking, Learning Lessons from, and I can't see the, something in Iraq. From
CSTs, cryptologic support teams.
Awesome. They recently met with 5 analysts who just returned from serving in the first wave of cryptologic support teams deployed to Iraq. And although they knew they were going to the meeting, that they had done much to assist their technical forces in the region, they wanted to hear what they had learned on the job and what the SIGINT system can learn as well. Okay, so these people told them that they had gained an appreciation for what timely means at a tactical level and highlighted the need for quick responses. The CSTers also learned what it's like to deal with the NSA from the outside looking in and how best to make the right connections at NSA to answer questions and resolve problems. And I'm going to stop right there and just add that sounds to me like they're having to overcome bureaucracy. Like that's the nice way of saying they learned how to get around red tape. Then continuing with what this says, they also witnessed the importance of translating SIGINT for the tactical commanders to help them understand how the SIGINT could serve as the basis for military operations. And then the next paragraph says, what can NSA and the SIGINT system learn from their experience? One lesson is that the agency needs clearer POCs as anchor points for responding to requests from tactical units. Again, that they're obviously what this means is they've had a problem with bureaucracy. This means developing a structured way of providing assistance that will not hinge upon the field representative having the right personal contacts at the agency. That's interesting. We can also identify the optimal training requirements for CSTers and deployers of all kinds, and their attorneys are helping us do just that. I asked them to write a paper giving all their observations, and I plan to provide that to the Army so that they study it for the lessons learned as well. So they gave outstanding service to the NSA and to the customer. They each related to me that the tour made an indelible impression, yielding experiences they'll never forget. I expressed my gratitude for their enormous contribution in helping leverage the 20 to 30,000 soldiers on the ground in each division as partners. And then the next paragraph is labeled secret, and it says, in the past, about 90% of tactical military operations in Iraq were based on HUMINT, and now the share attributable to SIGINT is much higher. Thanks to the efforts of SIGINTers deployed in the region, such as the CSTs, CSG elements working with special forces, SIGINTers with IMEF's 2nd Radio Battalion, and others. In the last 6 months, tactical units have captured, killed, or wounded tens of thousands of insurgent forces in Iraq. And I'm guessing that was not actually a number of insurgent forces at all. As the director has often noted, where we have people deployed, our SIGINT has meaning. Otherwise, our material is just in the box, just in the inbox. The CST participants, as well as those who volunteer for deployment forward, are helping the agency evolve into an expeditionary SIGINT force. And they encourage all analysts to consider participating in deployments like this, where they can make a decisive contribution to the nation's efforts in Iraq. Yeah, what I took from that is bureaucracy, and also, just as a side note, again, they're calling insurgents when probably there are a good number of civilians in that number.
This was the most significant line for me. It's where they're talking about actually launching military operations solely on the basis of signals intelligence. Sure. But we've seen a similar reference before from an Iraq document. And this was in the context of how appalling it is for them to machine translate Arabic language, and then, in tandem with using signals intelligence to launch military operations.
Yeah.
But since we've already covered that, I would not include this reference. Okay. Have a quick breeze through this. So J2 is the intelligence staff. the impression I just get from this is, once again, like, how behemoth the military structure of the United States is.
Good point. Yeah.
It is literally behemoth. Like, we talk about like 15,000 people at NSA or whatever. But when you include DOD, Pentagon, and all the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and excuse me, my voice is drying out again. And all of the different armed services and their staffs, and all the different contractors and their staffs. I mean, someone said on Twitter over the last week, they're like, you realize up to 30% of the entire United States workforce is employed in some capacity serving the war machine. And I thought to myself, like, wow, I was like, that seems like an inordinately high number, right? For like 30% of the entire population to be. But then when you think about the defense contractors, the manufacturers and the distributors and the like all of the different things, the fusion centers and all the related law enforcement agencies and everything else, and the diplomatic side, the diplomatic corps, and all of these things, all these like satellite groups and operations, like it probably literally is 30% of the entire US workforce. Sadly, they were saying that in the context of trying to justify why it needed to continue. Exactly. As if people couldn't be re-employed or repurposed into other things. I mean, if the United States decided to take their $1 trillion a year or whatever it is that they spend and turn it into domestic infrastructure projects and whatever else, then I'm sure they would have no problem re-employing those people into something other than raping the planet and murdering millions of people. But there's this real attitude from within the US military that to scale down or to repurpose the military would like result in some kind of economic collapse. And I just don't believe actually that military death, war, and destruction leads to a strong economy. I don't think it has led to a strong economy at all. I think the evidence of that is all around us. Like we had the 2008 crash, economic crash, after 7 years of war and raping and pillaging the planet. So, I mean, not to mention the effects of it. Like David Swanson, the famous anti-war activist, talks about like the massive implications for pollution and climate change from the war machine, and how the Pentagon is a huge polluter. It's responsible for, a massive percentage of US emissions and whatnot. Like war literally kills the planet. It doesn't just kill people, it kills the planet. And what is the economic cost of killing the planet? Like, how do you calculate that? But it seems that part of the internal propaganda, the propagandizing of those who work for the military, is this false idea that it's economically beneficial to continue destroying countries.
Yeah, I've summed that up in an article just on the issue of Yemen. I just referred to it as the economy of death.
Yes,
that is bipartisan. It's you have Obama enacting the same policies that Trump is now continuing at the moment, and that that we're all worsened the situation that Bush gave us. So yeah, I think that whether you're propagandizing it or whether you're against it, we're all seeing the same issue. Like nobody's pretending that doesn't exist, which I guess is kind of appalling in and of itself. Like it's so huge that they can't even pretend that that's not the case, so they just make it into a good thing.
Okay, we'll keep moving. I totally agree with you, and I think economy of death is a brilliant way to describe it, but I think that it's a self-defeating economy. It's a false economy. Because, I mean, they're going to run out of places. Like there's only half a dozen countries, in the world left that they haven't completely destroyed and, appropriated all resources from. What happens once there's nowhere left?
Well, this is, I think,
no one answered this question. What happens once the US has consumed every country on the planet?
This is where I think it's really similar to the oil companies. What happens when all the oil is gone? And the oil companies are trying to keep us on that energy source as long as possible. They're going to, rip up sands and, you know, do whatever they have to do to keep us there. But I'm just saying I think it's a similar limited outlook. And it's because you have interests in the arms industries and in the oil industries, you know, in that kind of comparative analogy, in both of them don't want that system to end. So because of their self-interest, they're going to try and continue that paradigm as long as possible. And I think the only way to address it is to try and replace it. But that's my opinion. So hold the spam, please, from redacted to target access collection and techniques. Separating the wheat from the chaff when collecting email traffic. So this is basically an email about how to do spam email. So
I think it's not how to do spam, but how to filter it.
Okay, yeah. So it looks like most of the paragraphs are secret, and it begins, spam or junk email makes over 60% of the world's email traffic. This is an annoyance at the very least for the recipient. And when the NSA intercepts target emails heavily laden with this same spam, it becomes the agency's problem as well. Okay, yeah. So they're trying to figure out how to filter the spam of targets. So spam affects NSA by impeding our collection, processing, and storage of DNI traffic. Unfortunately, filtering out spam has proven to be an extremely difficult and cumbersome task. It demands the use of hundreds of constantly changing filter terms and runs the risk of false hits, i.e. eliminating valid intelligence-bearing emails instead of the unwanted spam. Analysts in proliferation and arms control SIGDEV and CES data and metadata services have tackled the problem from a different angle. They've developed a way to filter spam in-house through a metadata tagging process that uses existing dictionary and scissors processing. This content and volume-oriented approach is not a panacea, but it is the only process actually doing something about spam. Presently, they are tagging an average of 150,000 spam sessions a day in about 2/3 of data flows containing common email. Some analysts are reporting as much as a 40% reduction of spam in their daily searches, but results vary by target. And then the last paragraph says, furthermore, these metadata tags should provide a more accurate means of measuring and studying the overall effect of spam and should help us adjust our front-end collection. If you'd like to know more about this anti-spam effort, contact blank at blank.
Okay, so you wouldn't think it, but this is actually an incredibly significant document for New Zealanders. And I'm going to screenshot it and send a tweet about it.
Okay, cool.
So the reason that it is incredibly significant for New Zealanders is because the stupid ex-Prime Minister of New Zealand, John Key, when he was trying to defend the Government Security Communications Bureau, GCSB, or Government Communications Security Bureau, he was trying to defend the mass surveillance of New Zealanders. He said that actually the GCSB is just like Norton antivirus, and that all they're trying to do is control spam so that New Zealand businesses are not subjected to spam emails, and that what they actually do is just a giant filtering service. And he got on TV, and honest to God, that's what he said. And he said that as a direct response to the revelations by Glenn Greenwald and Edward Snowden at the moment of truth in 2014.
Nice.
So what this email does is show us that the only context in which they give a shit about spam is nothing to do with protecting end users, but it's actually to refine their own targeting processes and save themselves time when they target people. So if you want to have a look in chat and catch up with that, that would be great. I'm just going to go and send a little tweet out to New Zealanders and give them this context.
Awesome. Just heading over to chat right this second. Wow, you guys have been talking a lot while we were away. So I scrolled up a bit and I'm seeing, you know, the discussion of Europe and whatnot from one of the first documents we looked at, and that's fantastic that you guys are talking about that. Yeah, and you know, Hope Kesselring talking about the economy being based on war. Absolutely, definitely. I really like the phrase economy of death, because I think it's pretty literal. It's time we started thinking of war as a business opportunity. Oh, wow. I didn't know that that was a direct quote from her. Thank you. Angel Tibbs wrote, quote, it's time we start to think of war as a business opportunity. And that's the end of the quote. And it's from Hillary Clinton. Wow. That is not a quote that I'm aware of. That's pretty shocking. And then Barbara talked about Africa being all about oil. And that is definitely one of the things that we found in the documents is the discussion of exactly that. And then also RSFO adds that Africa is primarily special metals like in the Congo, and the largest oil fields are still in Venezuela and the Persian Gulf. And that's a really important point too, because if you look at the situation in Venezuela and the sanctions that both Obama and Trump have imposed on Venezuela over both of their terms, it's very similar to the Saudi situation where you have both Obama and Trump signing $100 billion arms deals with Saudi Arabia. Those two issues are ones that you can see, the way that these presidents, despite their outward differences, are much, much the same. But just scrolling through. Yeah, RSFO, that was a great comment. And then the conversation looks like it's continuing about Africa. 1329C says, we're not in Africa to hug and save people. And it's like, yep, nope. Yeah, and Hope Kesselring says, we're punishing Venezuela. And that's absolutely right. So actually, and I just want to say this because at one point I considered writing an article just on the sanctions against Venezuela that Trump and Obama have both put in place. Because sometimes on social media, you see something that's so ridiculous that you just stop your entire day and you have to write an article about it, or at least that's how my life goes sometimes. Because I saw a social media post that effectively said, this is what communism did to Venezuela. And then it showed a short clip of Venezuelans stoning a cow to death. And I thought that it was, I understand why people of a certain political persuasion would want to equate communism and that. But I think that it's really, really important that no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, that you understand that, the US is greatly responsible for some of the chaos in Venezuela's, political, economic situation right now, and some of the starvation, the lack of supplies. It's a little bit, I would compare it sort of slightly to the situation with Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and them choking their ports in Yemen to prevent them getting aid. So, I don't pretend to be an expert in the subject, but that's my opinion. And I just think it's really not helpful to equate a country being destroyed by the US with their system not working. That's my point, I guess. It's the same, and it's the same when a lot of people were kind of buying into the drums of war rhetoric against Iran when they had a protest happening. And I absolutely support the right of protesters to, gather and engage in dissident actions of whatever kind. But I think it's really important to understand that the regime that's currently in place in Iran wouldn't have been possible or would not have happened if it wasn't for the previous intervention of the CIA and the US interests in Iran. So, it's never easy to just say, well, we should just go in there and fix something, or, well, that social system just didn't work, because so many times in this day and age, America is involved or has played some part in the chaos. So
I'd just like to share something with you on that topic.
Yeah, sure.
Here we go.
Yeah, and see, that was one of the things, is that there some people that have been in the intelligence agencies have been shocked and horrified to see them using these techniques that they used to destabilize Iran on American citizens.
Right, so this is the CIA's technique. This is John Stockwell, a former CIA case officer. The CIA's technique is called destabilization. It's what's done when you have a government in the capital that you don't like in a target country and you want to discomfort them or put pressure on them. The CIA's technique is to make the people of the target country so totally miserable that the social and economic fabric of the country simply tears apart. Venezuela.
Exactly.
And then the government can't govern, and then you can make them come to terms or throw them out of office. You pull every string you can to get articles in every element of the media to make them look bad. Venezuela.
Also,
to describe them, and of course, to describe them as incompetent, to describe them as brutal and totalitarian, and to discredit their democratic processes. That is Iraq, that is Russia, that is Venezuela, was Libya. That is the counterterrorism doctrine.
And that is also, that relates also to the comment about oil and the fact that Venezuela is a target because of that situation. But yeah.
This is probably a really fascinating Twitter thread for you guys. In this thread, I pretty much compiled like examples of what they've done to every country.
Oh, that's fantastic and incredible.
Yeah, so I've got like, this is what they did to, and to targets. So it started like with me tweeting about my documentary, and then I was like, and this is what they did to Kim, and this is what they did to Julian, and this is what they did to David Miranda, and this is what they did to Michael Hastings. This is what they did to Laura Poitras. This is what they did to a human rights advocate. This is what they did to Snowden. Some horrible person saying to Snowden, mate, you're better off in Russia. Actually, it's probably not a horrible person, but the content of the tweet isn't very nice. You're better off in Russia. They'll assassinate you if you are allowed back in the US, pardoned or not. This is what they did to indefinitely detained, untried suspects, and this is what they wanted to do to Kin.com's wife. If any of you aren't aware of this, the New Zealand spies, their emails that came out in court involved plots to have a sexual relationship with Kim and move into his mansion and marry him. They also had emails where they were talking about wanting to gang rape his wife. This is a government service. A government service suggested on work email that they gang rape Kim.com's wife. Kim.com, who they charged with copyright infringement. If they just wanted him for copyright infringement, what are the chances that they would be plotting stuff like this?
It's just unspeakable. It's just absolutely horrific. I don't think there are words that are sufficient to describe that. You know?
I'll share that thread because the thread goes on and on and on and on and on. And there's just example after example of them targeting individuals and entire countries. So like, this is what they did to Nicaragua, Panama, Grenada, and Angola. Like,
and somebody added in Yugoslavia as well. And that's a really important one with the Balkans and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And this is what they did to Honduras, El Salvador, Cuba, Indonesia, Iran, Laos, and Chile. And this is what they did to 40 countries worldwide. And that's more testimony from someone who was involved in CIA atrocities. This is what they did to Guatemala's only democratically elected government. This is what they did to the Senate and to their congressional overseers, who also were victimized and spied on. This is what they did to their own wives and girlfriends with the love int. These are the NSA analysts who are using the NSA's Eye of Sauron to spy on their wives and girlfriends and anyone they come into contact with. And this is what they did to Syria, and this is what they did to climate scientists. The NSA spied on world leaders' climate change meetings on behalf of the big oil companies. And this is what they did to environmentalists, doctors, and child poverty agencies. NSA and GCHQ spied on UNICEF, spied on allies, aid groups, and businesses. And this is what they did to David Kelly, the Iraq weapons inspector, who said that there was no weapons of mass destruction. This is what they did to a Libyan protester who was abducted and tortured by MI6 and CIA and Gaddafi under a US-led rendition program.
You need to, if you haven't already, you need to just turn this list into a decipheru.com style like bullet point article, because this is incredible and it deserves to be more than a Twitter list. I think it definitely is worth more than just a thread, even though it's an incredible thread. I think, yeah.
I'll copy the thread into chat for you guys.
YouTube always chooses the weirdest freeze frames as screenshots. It always chooses the worst.
And that's why, like, the beginning of the thread, I'm like, I will never side with the out of control Western intelligence agencies, because this is what they do to targets. Like, how can you read this list and ever support the people that do this? The torturers and would-be gang rapists and murderers and genocidal war criminals. Like, how can you ever support that regime? Which it literally is a regime.
And when you, yeah, exactly, definitely. I think that it gives you the picture. These dot points provide the overall image of a military dictatorship that runs the entire planet, and that we happen to be in the countries that run that dictatorship. But it's really interesting as well when you think about one of our former presidents having been a CIA director as well. And I believe, and somebody in chat correct me if I'm wrong in remembering this quote, was there not a time when Bush Sr. said something about if they knew what we'd done, they would have hung us from trees? Is that an actual quote?
Yeah, there was.
Because I mean, that's what comes to mind. The CIA director president having said that, it just, what you've shown in that thread reminds me of that. Like, if if the public really understood the nature of the CIA and our intelligence agency deep state, yeah, it wouldn't be this idea of exporting democracy.
Same thing like Brennan on CNN, like people like see him on CNN in a business suit or whatever, but they don't see him like stalking the halls of Guantanamo Bay. They don't see him like overseeing torture program and overseeing spying of American citizens. Like, if they actually saw what he did on an average day at work, like, they would find it very difficult to then see him sitting on a CNN panel. And I was, I mean, like, God forbid I ever say the word Putin, considering I get told that I live in Putin's palace and all kinds of fucking, excuse my language, ridiculous things every single day. But I was on YouTube and I stumbled across a Frontline documentary on Putin, which was 2 hours of an interview with John Brennan talking about Putin. And I thought to myself, literally 2 hours of John Brennan blabbing on about Putin. And I was just thinking to myself, can you imagine the uproar if, like, the head of the FSB or whoever they are, whatever, SVR or whatever, can you imagine, like, the chief of that agency doing a 2-hour interview about President Obama? And it being packaged as a documentary and sold as a documentary. Like, here's the inside scoop on Obama from the head of the Russian intelligence service. Like,
what we would do in the West.
CIA's done.
We would react and say, oh, look at that state propaganda. They're not a democracy. And look how much of a military dictatorship they are, which, you know, is exactly what we've just been saying about the West. So,
and here's the proof that Russia want to subvert America because they make these documentaries about Obama and blah, 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 blah. Right. But here's Brennan sitting there talking for 2 hours about Putin, and it's educational. It's considered like an educational endeavor.
Yeah.
It's just batshit insane.
Yeah, and the known cases of the CIA and other agencies actually experimenting on American citizens as well is well documented and also horrifying. So this isn't something they just export. It's also done to their own citizens that they're supposed to be, you know, theoretically protecting. And yeah, like, I think I'd have to look up the agency that was involved with the Tuskegee experiment. Was one of the ones I was thinking of just now. Look that up.
Matt says they target anyone who even uses the name of target as a subject in their conversation. It's so true. It is so true.
So yeah, that was conducted by the US Public Health Service between 1932 and 1972. So they didn't end up ending that program where they gave people syphilis unknowingly until 1972 when they were exposed. So anyway, I don't mean to go on a complete side rant, but
and you know, the US Department, whatever health service is probably an NSA customer. I wouldn't be surprised.
Exactly. No, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I want to know what the intelligence link is to that experiment, because I'm sure that there is one. And yeah, that was only revealed in 1972 by a whistleblower, Peter Buxton, which led to major changes in US law and regulation and protection of people in clinical studies and informed consent. But the fact that in 1972 that was still happening, absolutely disgusting.
Okay, let's move on. That was a really good email about spam. Very happy with that. And happy with it in the context of it, contextualizing what the Prime Minister said in New Zealand. So you can be sure his talking points like came straight from NSA about how to try and combat the narratives from Snowden, the releases from Snowden. A veteran collector finds an exciting new job. From a senior collection officer desk coordinator. By 2001, after 30 years in collection and collection-related fields, I found myself turning into a SIGINT curmudgeon. I was convinced that collection was a dying career field and that NSA management was hastening its demise through neglect. Wow, a disaffected employee. I came to believe that the only people who recognized the importance of the art of collection management were collectors, and there were very few of us left. No one else seemed to appreciate the benefits of collection management done correctly. It seemed that everyone thought they could be a collection manager just by tasking something to site. I was not feeling the SIGINT love and I was disgruntled. Whether I was right or wrong, that's how I felt. As time in 9/11 passed, I became more and more frustrated because there were too few of us to get everything done that needed doing. On top of that, we're being asked to do a lot of web window dressing that, in my opinion, was nice to have, but not critical to the mission. After a particularly long and loud disagreement with my bosses in the middle of the office, I realized it was probably time to retire. Unfortunately, I still had over a year to go before I turned 55. Do they get to retire 10 years before everyone else?
I guess. Sounds like it.
Who gets to retire at 55?
People that are paid way too much to spy on their own citizens.
Are you freaking kidding me? I can't believe they get to retire at 55. The entire rest of the planet has to retire at 65, or in some countries, 70. 55. Although I thought about an early out, the penalty meant my family and I would have to take turns eating because there wouldn't be enough money to buy food for all of us at the same time. That is a bit strange. Really, after 35 years or whatever at the NSA, you can't afford food? Wow, maybe not. That idea was not a hit at home. Finally, in January 2002, I spotted an urgent request for senior collections officers in NSOC. There were no applicants for the positions, and they were so desperate they would accept people for 6 months temporary tours, even a disgruntled old curmudgeon like me. It looked like it was tailor-made for me. I even promised myself to the SEO desk for a year instead of 6 months, so it would take me past my 55th birthday by 3 months. I was feeling generous. The only thing that worried me was this whole like in it until you can retire thing, like retirement as like a what's the word I'm looking for, as a motivation to continue doing work that you know is bad, because soon you will retire. The only thing that worried me was I would be working for a Navy 06. I've never been very good with authority, especially the military type. Yeah, you're in the NSA for 35 years. And I projected all sorts of problems, but I took the job anyway. I had no doubt with 20 years of foreign satellite experience and 10 years of H high frequency collection that I would have no problems fitting into NSOC and handling the SEO duties. Combined with 15 years in field assignments and a working knowledge of the overhead and SCS disciplines, I thought I had it made. I was just a little bit cocky. Well, it turned out that the SEO desk was the single most demanding job I've ever had at NSA. It didn't take me long to realize what I didn't know outweighed what I did know by at least a factor of 10. I learned about collection resources that I could only guess at before this tour. The first few months were difficult while I learned what I needed and made the necessary ego adjustments. Then, just before we invaded Iraq, I noticed something strange. I was enjoying myself. I was challenged, meeting those challenges, and I enjoyed working with people again. At the end, as the end of my year approached, I negotiated with other desk officers to work out the ends of their tours so they could leave the desk early. I had no pride when I begged. I was a silver-tongued devil, and it worked because I left the desk only 1 month shy of a full 18-month tour. My projected problems with military authority did not materialize. Indeed, I worked for 2 Navy captains, and they're among the best bosses I've ever had. Top secret. During my tour in NSOC, I supported Afghan military operations, Iraqi military operations, numerous combat search and rescue missions, down to aircraft, hostage situations, and a myriad of other tasks. I helped track al-Qaeda operatives, Taliban members, members of the former Iraqi regime, and aircraft and ships carrying weapons to and from prescribed nations, sometimes all at once. I was on duty the night we went into Iraq, and I went home that night feeling wrung out, but with a sense of accomplishment. When I think back on all the history to which I had a ringside seat during that tour, it is almost overwhelming. That was some tour. I have to believe that the SEO tour would have to be the highlight of most collectors' careers. It's the culmination of everything a collector or collection manager has worked for and dreamed of. That was true for me. Since I got off the desk, I didn't cut my ties with it or NSOC. My official title is Senior Collection Officer, Desk Coordinator, but I prefer my nickname, Papa SEO. I now support the 5 sitting SEOs with operational and administrative help. My job is to see that they are trained to have the skills necessary to do the job, have the tools they require, and aren't bothered by extraneous issues. It's almost as much fun as being on the desk itself. I could have retired a couple of years ago, but I have too much to do. I have conferences to arrange, outreach to the RSOCs, and I hope I'm helping even a little bit to reinvigorate the collection field. Who knew? I encourage senior collectors out there to think about a tour on the desk. If you've given up on the collection field, this will help to open your eyes to the challenges we still face. You can still make a difference. It might be the best move you've ever made. Now, what is the date on this? 2005, 3rd of February 2005. So, as much as it is a giant piece of propaganda, it's also really interesting in the terms of like how much personal finance is a motivating factor for these guys.
True. Yeah, when they're not advertising the beautiful scenery around Pine Gap, they're talking about the money, for sure.
Yeah, it comes down to like money, literally down to money. I'm miserable here. The NSA is inept. We're not doing the things that we're supposed to do. Excuse me, applying my lip balm, but I'm like dry out like a prune if I don't.
You're fine. You're fine.
So he's absolutely miserable. Everyone's inept and incompetent, blah, 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 blah. They're not doing what they should be doing. But he wants the money. So he's sticking it out and moving to another job and moving to another role, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like Crocodile have some like interesting input at this point. Let's have a look and see. No.
Nothing yet.
The love of money is the root of all evil, says Hope. He found his evil purpose in life. I honestly can't believe that they get to retire. Oh, Crocodile says police in the UK get to retire at 55 with pay. Military can retire at 45 if they spend their whole life in the military and live through it.
Oh my God. Ridiculous.
Unbelievable. Okay, let's move on. So yeah, what are the motivations for like selling out your morals? Money.
And beachside Thanksgivings in Hawaii.
Joining S2. Okay, so it's an interview of someone who was stationed in Canada.
Representatives in the field will need to think of themselves as part of a global system rather than an independent operation. While we collaborate more and more, it will be very important that everyone play position and stay in constant communication. This principle applies within NSA CSS and with our international partners and across the intelligence community. And I know that we've gone over that point 1,000 times, but it also reminds me of the Zuckerbergs of the world wanting the civilian population to stay in constant contact and increase connection all of the time, you know. So yeah, they're talking about the type of collaboration that we've talked about, as I said, 1,000 times with Transformation 2.0, et cetera. So they talk about cultural transformation and melding offense and defense capabilities and the role they'll play in the SCNL world. They don't have an exact picture of where they'll end up, but they think, but they're reminded of a golf tournament.
This is just, I find this stuff bizarre. It's almost as bizarre as the like healthy relationship, medical checkup, blah, blah, blah. So she's saying that the global intelligence community are like golf players that can't see the flagpole in the fog, so they just hit the ball in its general direction. What?
We should just walk blindly.
What? What?
Linguist again.
And you know, like how many people have that have been interviewed in all these various roles have been like ex-Soviet, like, or you know, Iron Curtain related stuff. Like so many, like half of it is honestly making me think that Russia as a target suits the US because half of their spies have like literally got experience already working Russian targets from 30 years ago,
That's a
20
really
years ago. It's like they can just so easily like switch them back onto what they were already on before. It's like almost like a convenience. It's a target of convenience.
Yeah, I wonder how much energy is devoted to China these days over the NSA.
Yeah, I think obviously China's a big focus for them, but I think it's probably quite a difficult society to penetrate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they say that the USA lost dozens of assets in China after the opium breach.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, apparently dozens of US agents in China disappeared, literally were disappeared after the opium breach. So you'd think that like securing their systems would be like a pretty freaking high priority for the NSA rather than just trying to plot for the next war. But as we can see, it's almost like they don't care. Like
yeah,
it's almost like they don't actually give a shit if their systems are breached or if their data is leaked. Like
Yeah, it's like they're just so all powerful that it doesn't matter to them very much.
They just keep rolling forward.
It just still, it doesn't make any sense to me though. Still, even with the, if you consider them like I have Sauron level powerful, it's still, it's just nonsensical to me. But what I think I've learned most, well, one of the biggest things I've learned going through these documents with you is that their mentality is so different to what a civilian or outsider would think of them looking from the outside in. Like it's just a completely different parallel universe.
Well, what do people colloquially say? They're like, what is the justification for the existence of these agencies? They're securing us, they're keeping us safe, they're blah, 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 blah. But like at every opportunity that they have to actually spend even a small portion of their ridiculous amounts of funding on defending information, defending data, they don't. It's like Snowden was exactly right. It's all like offense, 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 offense.
Yeah.
Who are we going to target? Who are we going to sabotage? Who are we going to kill? Who are we going to shut down? Who are we going to manipulate? Who are we going to steal from? Like none of it is like, how are we going to secure the United States? How are we going to secure our data? How are we going to secure our personnel? Imagine how it must feel to be like a whatever secret agent or whatever they are of the United States and watch the opium data breach happen. If you guys don't know what the opium data breach was, it was the databases of the entire histories, all the information that is supplied when they apply for a clearance of everybody who has US clearance. That's literally like senators and like, politicians and employees of all the intelligence services and everything leaked. Stolen and leaked. Like it's supposed to be like the most sensitive data.
Yeah, it would be, understandably, yeah.
The most personal and sensitive data in the United States that they hold. And it got leaked, breached and leaked. And you hear practically nothing about it.
Yeah, no, it's true.
It's almost like it never happened, It's like, but let's attack Russia and let's attack Syria and let's attack Iran and let's drop a mother of all bombs on North Korea and let's blah, 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 blah. And we're doing it to keep America safe while the most sensitive information you have is leaked to the entire planet.
It's just so bizarre to see them not seem to care about their own agents or their own assets, at all. None.
See, I knew that they don't actually give a shit about their own agents because when I read that Bush's War or whatever it is by, what was it, the Obama book? I can't remember now, but it was by Bob Woodward. And Bob Woodward is like, there's a long conversation with me and John Kiriakou about Bob Woodward and on the anti-spy bill meetings, but Bob Woodward is like the sanctioned presidential biographer. And in one of the books, I'm pretty sure it was in Bush's Wars, he writes about the CIA burning its own, like literally burning, like with a bomb, its own like assets, its own agents, because they decided, literally, it's almost like they're bragging about it. Like the fact they actually put this in a Bob Woodward book, they talk about how they had this agent inside this facility in northern Iraq and they were going to bomb the facility. And they decided that they wouldn't tell the agent that they're going to bomb the facility, even though they knew the agent would be at the facility, because they didn't want to put the mission at risk by communicating with the agent. So they just blew up their own fucking agent. They just blew him up. And it's like, and after that, all I could think of was like all those stars on the CIA wall. You know how they have all the stars and it's like, the lives that have been sacrificed for like, keeping America safe, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking like, how many of those stars are actually killed by the agency?
Yeah, like it's presented like the blood order, the tree of liberty, and then it's, this.
I couldn't believe it. Honestly, when I read it, I just had my mouth hanging open. I'm like, you're absolutely joking me. You're joking me. You go to all of this effort to like, pay people and corrupt people and recruit people and whatever the hell, and then you just blow them up for what? Unbelievable. And the fact that they openly, and not just that they admit it, but the fact that they had Bob Woodward publish it, it was like they were bragging about it. Like that, because
Yeah.
why would you say that? Why would you tell that story? Why would you, first of all, why would you do
What
it?
that
But
shows you is
second
the
of all,
culture,
why
though.
would you admit it?
Well, it shows you their mentality that is so bizarre to me, and I guess probably to most people. It doesn't make any logical sense or emotional sense that that would be their attitude. But it must be some sort of alien culture that I don't understand. That's for sure. But I think it reveals that is what I guess I'm trying to say.
It's just the strangest thing to me for them to put that there. And then there was another story as well that I told, like, and it just goes to show like the abject criminality of these services. But it was
Yeah.
in exactly the same book. And this in this particular story, they were talking about the post-Taliban invasion of Afghanistan, when they had the what is the council? There's like a council of Afghani chiefs or whatever. The Northern Alliance, was it a Northern Alliance or something like that? It was this like group of tribal leaders in Afghanistan that the CIA was trying to get to stand up against the Taliban. And so, anyways, they go to one of these like chiefs or whatever, tribal chiefs, tribal elders in this village, and they tell him like, we'll give you some amount of money. I forget how much it is. I was like, we'll just say $5 million, like for the sake of it, but the actual figures were in the book. They're like, if you join the Northern Alliance or whatever, and you take a stand against the Taliban, and you commit your troops to the effort, blah, 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 we'll give you this amount of money. And he says, no, thank you, I'm not interested. I don't want to participate. I don't want to be a part of this. And so the agency goes away, and then they arrange for a £50,000 bomb to be dropped on the doorstep of this tribal chief. And then, which, I mean, God knows how much those munitions cost, but let's just go and drop them on someone just to give them a scare. And then they go back to him and they offer him a fraction of the original amount of money to get him to do what they wanted him to do in the first place. And he accepts. Because what they're basically saying is, we will murder you and your entire family, and we'll level your entire village with a giant bomb if you don't do what we want you to do. Like, that's like outright fucking blackmail. Like, outright, like, what law exists in this world to do that?
Exactly.
What law exists which says that it's okay to drop munitions on a fucking civilian because they won't agree to be blackmailed by you?
But specifically by the United States military empire. Like,
it's impossible. I can't believe that there's any legal justification for conduct like that.
No, there isn't. There cannot be. That, I mean,
and what legal justification is there for them getting munitions, like serious munitions like that, and then deploying them on that basis for a blackmail operation? Like, how, like, who's signing the paperwork, like what? Just incredible. And then yet again, they're bragging about this to Bob Woodward, who's then writing about it in his book and then selling millions of copies, and it's a New York Times bestseller and stuff. So it's not even like people can debate this or call it conspiracy theory. They're fucking admitting that this is what they did. They're admitting they killed their own agents. They engage in blackmail and corruption and drop bombs on people who won't do what they want them to do. And the whole, like, what in the hell,
Yeah, well, and then when they don't admit it, when it's revealed by, let's say, a WikiLeaks publication, that's exactly why they retaliate so hard against the people that show them doing these illegal, immoral, and disgusting things to innocent people. So that's why you have this massive backlash against people like that, people like you, blah, 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 etc.
Okay, we seem to somehow have got some conversation in chat about like Islamophobia versus Sharia law. Guys, there's actually a middle ground. Like, you don't have to hate and despise all Muslims, and you don't have to sign up to Sharia law. There's actually an option in the middle where you don't hate people, but you also don't have to become a Muslim. Like, can we like both? These are two extremes. Like, Sharia law is extreme. Let's be frank, it's extreme. But so is Islamophobia. And in fact, Islamophobia and Sharia law have more in common than not, because they're both extremist schools of thought. So pick the non-extremist path where you don't hate all Muslims, but you don't have to become a part of Sharia law either. And try and steer clear of those narratives, because those are divide and conquer narratives. The reason that you're told, that the left is like Islamophobia and the right is like Sharia law, like it's a divide and conquer strategy. You can walk down the middle. You don't have to subscribe to either of those.
Yeah, and I actually think that one of the most interesting findings on that subject is the stuff that we've talked about here in Decipher You, that Suzie's talked about, especially when we have the document mentioning that the EU is one of the most important strategic, issues that the NSA was talking about. And one of the documents that I looked up the other day for research purposes, but anyway, the point is that, as I believe Suzie's mentioned a few times, that logically leads to the conclusion, or the possibility, that a lot of the migrant crisis going on right now in Europe may be in part to do with that issue of the US wanting to destabilize Europe. But that's just my take on that.
And because they were warned in the UN, on the UN floor, to their faces, if you destabilize Libya, it will cause a massive migrant crisis.
Exactly. And thanks Obama for that. Yeah, exactly.
Millions of people from the African Horn, the barrier that Libya provided, the physical land barrier, will be down. And the population in Northern Africa will flood into Europe. The US was told this to their face. You can go to YouTube and watch the video of Gaddafi telling them, this is, if you destroy our regime, this will happen to you. His direct quote, he said that Europe will become black within the shortest time, because you will not be able, that was what he said. Europe will become black within the shortest time, because you will not be able to control the flood of the population, the migrants from Northern Africa into Europe. This is what is coming your way if you destroy our borders, if you destroy the security that we provide. And I'm not telling you that Gaddafi is a good person, because obviously anybody who gets into that situation where they're like the fucking dictator of a country is generally like corrupt and generally a murderer and generally God knows what else. So I'm not at all a fan of Gaddafi, but he friggin' stood there and told them, if you do this to us, this is what's going to happen to you. And exactly what he said has come to pass. Exactly. But what he wasn't counting on, and what nobody else knew, was that the US was thinking, well, good, that'll be Europe's problem. And Europe's a threat to us. Why do we give a shit if Europe gets destabilized?
Yeah, and I think it's really, really saddening to know that, Obama did that and was responsible for the actions that, destroyed Libya, and now there are open slave markets of migrants in Libya. So, it's horrific. It really is. But
now Libya's gone back 500 years or more. And now it's a CNN exclusive, but CNN didn't have a goddamn thing to say about what was done to Libya.
Yeah.
Before.
Well, do you want to get back to a couple of more documents before we call it a night, or do you want to wrap it up? Or
sure. Yeah, let's go through what's left. Okay, so this person who had worked Soviet targets, their most memorable experience, the Chernobyl accident and the O'Grady shoot down and rescue in 1995. God, that makes me want to go on another rant, because I saw this like so-called truther the other day posting this article about how actually everything at Chernobyl is fine and nuclear fallout doesn't really affect anyone's health. And it's like, this is the new actual conspiracy theory. It's like,
that's just for when another Fukushima happens and they have to pretend that we aren't all radioactively, affected or whatever.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's the whole like nuclear is safe, like posturing.
Yeah.
When it's clearly not. For Chernobyl, a bunch of communications activated in the Kiev military district didn't fit any of the profiles of normal activity. So we suspected something was going on. A few days later, we became aware of the accident and understood the unusual activity represented the forces in place to assist in the cleanup operations. During the O'Grady shoot-down and rescue, it was fascinating to be part of the team, the system responding to track, locate, and extract O'Grady. Oh, and I can't miss the opportunity to talk about being chosen as Lieutenant General Hayden's executive assistant.
Of course.
I was serving at the MRSOC as Chief of Staff while General Hayden was the commander of the Air Intelligence Agency, and I had some interaction with him at that time. While I was due to PCS back to Fort Meade, I applied for the exec job. I had a phone interview with him where the line dropped out at least once. What? Followed by a face-to-face meeting at NSA CSS HQ. I was thrilled and a bit nervous to be selected and worked with him for 3+ years until my assignment to Canada. Being part of the 100 Days of Change and transformational initiatives, such as the hiring of outside expertise, dealings with Congress and media, working with elements of the intelligence community, foreign partners, industry, and academia, institution of corporate business process, just to name a few, gave me an appreciation and understanding of the agencies from a very different vantage point. So it's really interesting that this person with all this Soviet experience became chief of staff to Hayden, because also it turns out that the new Trump CIA director was posted Pompeo was posted on the Iron Curtain and is ex-Cold War as well. So he did this interview a couple of weeks ago, and in the intro they gave a biography and they talked about his army days posted on the Iron Curtain in the Eastern European countries. And that was when the penny dropped for me that both the pro-Trump and the anti-Trump crowd have Cold War history.
Yeah. And
both
plus,
of them.
And the other thing about Hayden too is just that he and the Clintons, I think of them as viruses that just keep coming back and never ever go away. Hayden pops up so much in all of the places you don't want to see him.
Just reading chat.
Yeah, and we've seen references to both Hayden and the Clintons in this evening's Decipher You and the documents that we've looked at. So.
I hope so. That's not polite to talk about nuclear stuff. I find that greatly amusing. Angel says Syria is actually one of the last secular countries left over there. Iraq was also secular.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's something that not many people realize. But Iraq, there was actually no drama or issues between Sunni and Shia in Iraq. They got married with no problems. They participated in the same jobs and schools and everything. There's no problems. Now, people will say because the Ba'ath Party was Sunni that means it wasn't secular, but it's actually completely untrue. It's just that the ruling party, of course, the ruling party rewards its cronies. That wasn't a religious issue. It was a corruption issue.
Yeah.
Correct. But the Sunnis and Shias live together. I mean, when they talk, the US media is so divisive. They talk about Sunni neighborhoods and Shia neighborhoods, but they all live together in the same neighborhoods until the sectarian violence that came along with the post-Iraq. It was in the Negroponte days. There was the Negroponte death squad days. That was when the Shia had to move out of the Sunni neighborhoods and the Sunni had to move out of the Shia neighborhoods. And it was so bad that they would have prayer tests at the checkpoints. So as people were traveling across the city, if you couldn't recite Shia prayers, you would be killed for not being Shia. And if you couldn't recite Sunni prayers, you would be killed for not for being Sunni. And so there was Iraqi teenagers were using the internet to train each other in each other's prayers so that as they passed through the various checkpoints, they could pretend to be of the opposite sect to what they were. And this is like the true moderate Iraqi people were actually working together to protect each other from the sectarian group. So everyday regular Sunni and Shia were working together to try to protect each other from what was happening, because they'd gone to school together, worked together, lived and loved together, eaten together, shopped together for decades. And it was only the war that changed that.
Exactly.
And that prevented that. So wherever you see these invasions is where the sectarian violence follows, just as in Syria.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just as in Syria.
Well, and then there was the fantastic reporting from people from Consortium News that talked about the fact that Obama may have actually actively armed some terrorist groups, I think including ISIS. So it the idea that we go over there to fight terrorism is actually really, really, truly absurd in relation to the facts of the issue. It really seems like we go over there and we create the problem to then continue to go fix it by spending a whole lot of money on our military industrial complex. So
Hope and Angel, you're both spot on. Hope's just said they find the cracks in the society and they exploit them. And Angel's just said, or they try to force their own cracks. That's exactly right. It's exactly what they did in Iraq. And it's just disgusting and despicable. Despicable.
Yes, exactly. So they go in, they bomb everything to hell. And the other thing is too, it's not just that, and I don't mean to get on a huge rant about the destabilization of Iraq or any other country, but one of the things you did see in Iraq as well, in addition to what you just said, Suzie, is that they fired and I think we've talked about this before, but they fired the Iraqi police forces. They, got rid of the whole army. So they actively got rid of the underlying infrastructure so that then they could create a horrible destabilized situation that they would have to then pour more resources and troops into, quote unquote, dealing with. And so I think that is definitely a pattern that you see over and over again. It's not just like, oh, we're going to come in and take control of a pre-existing infrastructure, we're going to flatten the infrastructure so then we just get locked into an endless situation. And I think we did talk about that, and it was in relation to the UN document that talked about nation building. That's what I'm remembering. Anyway,
it comes back to the destabilization agenda. So look, people are like, please rant. I love it.
Well, it's what Jenny and Angel and a whole lot of and Hope have all pointed out. It's the create the problem that you then have to be the solution for. You have you want the problem to exist so that you can come in and quote unquote fix it, which then you get grants and money from Congress to do, and rinse and repeat in a different place. So. And it's it's sad for the people of Iraq and for Syria and for all these places that have been destroyed utterly. And it's also sad for the U.S. soldiers' lives that are wasted and they come back with PTSD or they don't come back at all. And for what? So anyway.
Okay, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for putting a smile on my face with your awesome comments in chat.
Fantastic people. Thank you. Your chat, the chat has been pretty awesome this evening. I didn't see the bit about Sharia law, so I can't comment on that, but the rest of it that I've seen has been amazing.
What they fear is our unity, says Angel. It's completely right. The Tea Party and Occupy movements working together was the single greatest fear of the establishment, because when the right wing and the left wing come together and are united, that is the singular greatest chance that we have for emancipating ourselves.
Agreed.
So
Definitely.
People like Caitlin Johnston, I mean, there are people, believe me, there are some people that I think are just like despicable. I don't want to retweet them and I don't want to work with them. But I also understand that working with people who have completely opposite, different viewpoints to you is the most powerful thing that you can do in terms of undermining the divide and conquer objectives of the establishment.
And I think, Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the 99%, like when we understand that we literally are the 99%,
all of us
and
together.
the 1%. Yes, Roger Waters did mention Caitlin. That's amazing. I saw that video, RSFO. Caitlin is, as we'd say in New Zealand, Caitlin is the shit. Like she's so good. She's so cool. Her writing is just so spot on and so clever. Ruthless, I call her writing, because it's ruthlessly honest.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so on point, and she
Yeah,
doesn't waste a word.
Yeah, exactly. She magically cuts to the core of every single issue. She just slices right to the heart of it, and you get the bone of like the truth. And it's just every time she tweets, even I'm just like, how did you get that? That's amazing. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and she can do it in 600 words, you know, whereas my style is so different. Like I'll spend 7,000 words and go into the nitty gritty of absolutely everything, but she can just, as you say, cut to the heart of it in 600 words and done. It's quite truly remarkable.
Yeah, it's a definite talent for sure.
Cool. Okay, guys, thanks so much. I have a ton of journalism coming out this week. Yeah, I saw her. Sorry, I'm just responding to chat. Someone said she's a mighty good poet. I actually saw a beautiful video of her reading poetry from her book, and it was just next level. It was really, really, really amazing.
No, yeah, I think she's going to be one of those people, you know, that is going to be remembered in history books for sure when all is said and done. Like people, I feel like English lit classes of the future, if there is any good society worth being in left in 100 years, we'll be looking at Caitlin Johnstone's writing and going, oh my God, let's get into this poetry that she did. Let's look at her political writing next to the poetry. Yeah.
And
I can imagine.
how shameful that practically no one would publish her.
Yeah,
she has
exactly.
such massive following. She's so popular. Her work resonates with so many people. You would expect every Time magazine having to post Rolling Stone or whoever else to be like jumpy. They would love their writers to get 500,000 hits on a piece like Caitlin got on one of hers, but they wouldn't touch her with a barge pole. And that just goes to show how corrupt the media is.
That's because their interest is social control, not actually appealing to readers. And I've talked about that a few times in different articles, but the whole point is they don't depend on readership anymore because they can't, because media has been a dying industry. And so now they totally rely on the funds of the deep state to prop them up. And so their master is control, not appealing to an audience at all, and Caitlin is obviously the complete opposite of that. And that's why she's so popular and so anti-establishment. So it's a good mix.
And she's a beautiful human being.
Definitely.
She has been really kind and really supportive of both of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're very lucky to call her friend.
Cool. Absolutely.
Okay, guys, we're going to sign out. Thank you, Derek Schaefer. Thank you, Angel, RSFO, Jenny Lynn, Hope, 1329C, Matt Monroe, Tony Tiger. Well, it's interesting seeing new names in the chat, eh?
Yeah, definitely.
Seeing people that I hadn't seen before. Who else am I missing? Probably tons of people. Thank you, Cockatoo. Thank you, Fly. Thank you, Cryptos.
And if it isn't over already, I think after we tune off, everybody should go in and watch the H.A. Goodman interview with Randy Credico. It's going to be happening.
Yeah, I just tweeted about it a little time ago.
After we wrap up, go straight over to H.A. Goodman and take a look at what he's saying, because I'm sure it'll be a good conversation. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Anyway, thank you all.
RSFO says auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiedersehen, RSFO. Das vidania. And ka kite anō, New Zealand.
Bye, guys. You're awesome. We'll
Bye,
see you
Shelley. See you guys in a few days' time. Night.